Worst timing ever for yawning. Hello, everyone. It is I, Dark Symphony 777. And before I actually get into this review, I just wanted to do a little FaceTime and do a little preamble before the actual review to apologize to the author Super Mario Bros. Ultimate for my poor review of the Bee Who Couldn't Fit earlier. It was mainly due to the fact I was trying to do review 8 stories back to back, and it didn't really work. Not to mention the whole thing with the total drama video I did afterwards, and oh boy, that was a shit show. Let's just say, there was apparently a lot of fighting between the author and other people. I'm not gonna name names. I'm just saying it was a shit show. So I wanted to redo this video because I honestly think I didn't do a good enough job explaining myself for this specific review. I am going to keep the original video up, but I'm going to leave a comment to put a comment in to this video in that comment section to show that, yes, go for the second half of that video, go to this video. But I'm going to keep it up mainly for the Angel Beat story because I think I was pretty on the ball with that fan fiction. So, I do apologize again. And I do think that I need to at least learn. I even have cliff notes. Friend actually suggested trying to do scripting. Last time I tried to do scripting was all the way in 2016, either 2016 or 2017, when I was literally about to start reviewing fan fictions. I sounded so robotic, and I was so afraid all this time of coming off as ungenuine and fake if I just sounded like a bland, boring robot. And it's kind of haunted me all this time. Even my friends constantly point out you're really afraid of letting people down and all that. I even looked it up I know how to spell it, I just don't know how to pronounce it. Actiophobia, I believe it's called. I believe that's the best I could come up with, actually pronouncing it, because it's a weird spelling. So, I hope you enjoy the actual review, and I hope I actually do the story justice, because there's a lot of stuff I genuinely didn't talk about. I'll see you there. Let's get started. Hello, my fellow readers. It is I, Dark Symphony 777. Welcome, everyone, to the redo of The Bee Who Couldn't Fit by Super Mario Bros. Ultimate. I'll be leaving a link to the story in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts on the story, and finally, again, this is my opinion, and I honestly hope I don't fuck this up. So, what is The Bee Who Couldn't Fit? Well, this is actually a sequel, sort of. It's a sequel / prequel to The World Above. Technically, it is a sequel because the first and last chapter actually take place after this story, but the bulk of the story, i.e. the framing device, takes place as a flashback or / story told by the character Brittany that happens before The World Above. It makes sense. It honestly does make sense. These types of stories do exist all the time. It's just they're kind of hard to describe because of what they are. So let's actually talk about the main bulk of the plot. So the story actually starts with Pearl going to her friend Belle's house, wanting to hang out with not only Belle but also Brooklyn and Brittany. I can't remember if in World Above she met Benny, but she does meet him here, so it kind of evens out. However, a big storm actually happens at the Honey Kingdom. No idea why I messed that up. Thinking of the Bee movie for some reason. And a storm happens, leaving everyone unable to leave the house. To pass the time, they all decide to try and tell everyone stories, and Pearl asks Brittany, due to the simple fact that Brittany is actually a wasp, not a bee, how exactly she met Brooklyn and Belle. and thus the bulk of the story is basically a tale of Brittany telling Brittany sitting down with our friends around her, telling the story of how not only did Brittany move to the Honey High Kingdom, but also how she met Belle in Brooklyn, and also Benny. But Benny kind of is there. I completely kind of forget he's there at times. Now, one of the issues I actually had a problem with the story in terms of how I messed up in the first review is the description of Brittany's autism. Brittany has what is called Asperger's syndrome. Now, you're wondering what is Asperger's syndrome? According to Wikipedia, Asperger's syndrome is a type of high functioning autism specifically described involving social interaction, nonverbal communication, restrictive repetitive patterns of behavior and interest, otherwise known as hyperfixation. There are various forms of Asperger's, and nowadays there's actually just a unified autism. But back in my day, the 90s and 2000s, there was various forms of autism. Asperger's syndrome was actually one of the more mild versions. The symptoms, or at least the main well-known symptoms, are a lack of communication, i.e., people with people with Asperger's tend to not be able to read rooms, understand body language, and tend to take things very literally when it comes to figures of speech. For instance, if you tell someone to just jump off a bridge, even if you're joking, a person with Asperger's would legitimately take that seriously and possibly jump off a bridge and get hurt or even die. Yeah, that's kind of how Asperger's kind of is dangerous. The other most well known symptom is hyperfixation. Usually, people with Asperger's tend to hyperfocus on one specific interest or one specific hobby to the point it technically consumes their entire life. For example, I have Asperger's and I tend to be fixed on storytelling. So I tend to want to bring up storytelling a lot. This actually has an impact on various day-to-day activities. Usually, when people with Asperger's talk and communicate with people who don't understand how Asperger's work, they will often try and steer direction of conversation to their specific hobby. Partway through the story, when Brittany was describing the trouble that she had in her original school, she described a scenario that actually perfectly illustrated this, where Brittany was conversation with a random girl, and Brittany, by instinct, due to her Asperger's, directly. Uh, my throat's a bit sore, so I'm trying to keep swallowing. Brittany kept trying to bring the conversation back to her specific hyperfixation, which are power ups. Now I will actually want to say and give praise to the utilization of Asperger's in the story, but let me actually go through the rest of the plot before telling how I praise it. The story actually follows Brittany. Let me actually go back to the page. Brittany, as she struggles in her original school and eventually gets to move out with her family to the Honey High Kingdom. This is due to the fact that Brittany was bullied, very much so, throughout her entire time in school. She was often picked on, she was left alone, she was kind of called names, the whole bully victim gamut. Now, some of this can be justifiable because Asperger people in the past do tend to get bullied, and even the whole loneliness thing is also another symptom of Asperger's. A lot of people with Asperger's tend to want to be alone and by themselves a lot. However, Brittany doesn't really fit that specific criteria. Again, I'll talk about that when I talk about how well she's written from an autistic point of view. Just bear with me. Brittany goes to the Honey Hive Elementary School and eventually runs into various characters throughout the school. She runs into Wendy, a local bully, and also Belle, Brooklyn, and Benny. And the whole story basically follows her as she's trying to cope and learn how to grow up, as well as learning how to deal with her autism and learning that, hey, she has friends now, she has a life, she's no longer bullied and picked on, and she wants to keep that. And eventually, the three girls, they become good friends, which eventually leads to the end of the story where they calmly explain, this was a week before you showed up, Pearl, so hey, fun. That's more or less the plot. There are a lot of nuances in the plot, like Wendy's bullying, Brittany's helicopter parents, and a lot of other minor stuff. But bear with me, I will touch upon that in a few minutes. We have to talk about the big part of the story, and that is Belle's autism. Now, autism is a very, very difficult topic to depict in any sort of media. I don't think I've ever seen a any sort of story, whether it be a novel, a fan fiction, a TV show, a cartoon, anime, even a movie that have properly depicted autism in a very nuanced way. This is due to the fact that autism tends to be very complicated. No two people with autism are going to behave alike. For instance, when it comes to me and my best friend, I tend to have more control of my emotions than him. He tends to like wander around and kind of lash out, while I tend to keep more to myself and tend to be more quiet, but also be incredibly friendly, while he tends to be wants to be more by himself if need be. These are very nuanced takes, and while me and him have technically both Asperger's syndrome, our symptoms are manifest completely different. That's what makes writing autism in a very nuanced way incredibly difficult, because of the simple fact that it run right because of how much that goes into understanding autism, and also the fear of one wrong mistake, you could make a caricature, you could make someone who's basically an insult, who's basically a joke. There's tons of ways that writing autism in a very nuanced way can and will go wrong, and it has gone wrong in a lot of these mediums that I mentioned. It's just very common because of the complex nature of autism as a whole. Now, is Brittany a well written autistic rep or not? Yes. There are two ways to look at it, and that is the main two symptoms I mentioned earlier of Asperger's syndrome, the hyperfixation and the social issues. With Brittany specifically, she actually has nothing wrong from a social standpoint in the story. She actually wants to be friends with people. She's actually able to understand body language and social cues. She can even read the room a bit, although although based on what I read, it feels like that due to her age, she's not really that good at it. But again, that's more the fact that she's 8 rather than the fact that she's autistic. There's nothing wrong with her on that front. However, Brittany is a very, very picture perfect way of telling how someone with the hyperfixation side of Asperger's. Brittany is very, very fixated on the idea of power ups. Basically, the whole gamut of superpowers that not only the Mario franchise gets, but also the Donkey Kong franchise as well, due to the fact that Donkey Kong and Mario technically share the same universe. They're just in different locations. One detail you actually would notice if you read the book, if you read not book, read the story, is the fact that Brittany actually carries around a book that is full of information about power-ups. This is actually a very realistic take on hyperfixation with someone with autism, especially at a young age. Usually, when someone has a hyperfixation, they usually like to carry around an item that actually is associated with that item. In Brittany's case, it's the Book of Power Ups. Not only does she use it to kind of use as a personal conversation starter, she also uses it as a shield. What do I mean by that? Well, again, if you actually read the story, you notice that whenever her anxiety or stress goes up and she has the chance, she actually pulls out the book and starts reading it. With a lot of people with hyperfixation with these issues, is whenever their anxiety or stress goes high, they actually use that item i.e., Brittany's book, as a personal shield in order to calm them down and regulate their anxiety and stress levels. This is something a lot of people with this hyperfixation tends to have. I use it, my friends use it, Brittany uses it. There's tons of people who use this. And for instance, when later in the story, when Wendy actually targets Brittany for bullying, she notices the book and rips a page out. This causes Brittany to actually panic because now her bubble, her shield, is now completely gone. That wall that she's built up using the book has now crumbled, and she actually suffers a minor panic attack. That is, again, a very realistic take on the idea of hyperfixation, along with in as part of the Asperger syndrome. And thus, when they run into Brooke and Brooke actually tapes up the page, the first thing Brittany does is not acknowledge Brooklyn's selfless gifts, is actually to open the book and close and actually reads the book again very quickly. Despite the fact she's read it a dozen times, she speed reads it through it in order to regulate her emotions before she properly responds to Brooklyn. That is, again, a very realistic take. It's actually a very well done craft, and I think it's to this day one of the best representations of telling autism in any story, because it doesn't come off as hard boiled or even, and Brittany's not a caricature, or Brittany's not a bad representation. It's very nuanced, and it only focuses on one specific aspect, which is one of the two most other aspects. Now, I understand why the author had to focus on the hyperfixation. The whole social cue and the body language thing is more of a visual medium, and thus properly would run the risk of not being able to translate well to written word. However, with hyperfixation, it is actually much easier to write, implement, and execute in a written medium instead of a visual medium, which would actually cause pacing issues, because you need to actually, and a lot of people would not really get it. So, in that regard, is Brittany a good representation? Yes. She's not the most balanced because, again, her only aspect of Asperger's that is known is her hyperfixation. Sure, she has the body language, she has the repetitive movements, like when she involuntarily flaps her arms. But there can also be arguments made on that it could be the amount of any sort of just random mental or neurological disease that happens. People with like neurological diseases can just flap their arm, can twitch. I know I twitch when I go to sleep sometimes. It's just involuntary. And they're also a sign of anxiety, because people tend to like fidget and stuff like that when they're stressed or they're anxious. So it's hard to tell if that specifically is part of her Asperger's, or that's just other reasons. Hence why I only really focused on the main two symptoms, which are the most well-known symptoms of people with Asperger's. Now, when it comes to Brittany as a character herself, I mentioned in my previous video that she's not really worth it as a main character. And I used a poor example of basically kind of tying her to Sheen Estevez, and I admit that's kind of a really bad explanation. Now you're wondering why I'm bringing this up. In essence, Brittany doesn't work as a main character for two reasons. One, she lacks agency, and two, she doesn't really work. There wasn't enough work put into her to fully transfer her from a side character to a main character. You're wondering, what does this mean? Well, in short, there are many different types of characters. The three main ones I'm going to focus on are the main character, which, if we're going to use the three Bs, would technically be Belle. She was the most important character in The World Above, and thus played an integral role in trying to get Pearl back home. There is a supporting character, which is more of a background character, but also plays an important role in the story. This would technically be fulfilled by Brooklyn, as while in the World Above, she didn't have an important role as Pearl and Belle. She played an important role in getting Belle back home. Not Belle. I keep saying Belle. important role in getting Pearl back home, as she was the one who was able to locate the pipe, to find out information about the pipe and eventually find it. And finally, you have the side character, which technically falls in the same purview as a supporting character. The difference is the side characters tend to not be important to the plot. They're, in a sense, background characters. They're just there to add flavor to other characters, add dynamics, and flesh out other characters. This will be fulfilled by Brittany, and in the world above, she fulfills that role perfectly. She's not really that important to the plot. However, she does serve a purpose in fleshing out Belle, giving her another character to bounce off of, and also sorry about that, as well as giving a new dynamic to the duo, now trio. Now, when it comes to transforming characters, either supporting or side character to each other, that is actually very easy because all you really need to do is make that side character more important to the plot, and bam, Brittany is now a supporting character, not a side character. And this is something that a lot of these episodic cartoons tend to do with rotating cast. For example, with SpongeBob and Patrick, arguably the most famous cartoon duo of all time, Patrick is usually a supporting character in episodes. However, there are times where he's kind of needs to fulfill a side role, and so they just kind of use them as like a joke or as like a background character. Like there are many, many different examples of Patrick doing that, like so.
Who are you people?
Making up a song about copyright.
Welcome to Who are you people? Who are you people?
Now, moving side characters to supporting characters and vice versa is very easy to do. However, it's the same thing with supporting to main characters. However, transferring a side character to a main character is very difficult. Why? Because you need to reestablish the dynamics between that side character and all the other characters, as well as try and flesh out that main character as much as possible in order to get that vibe of main, to get the feel that they are important and thus need to be feel as a main character. Pearl and Belle in the world above fit that criteria perfectly. Brittany, however, in this story doesn't. And that's mainly because of, like I said, two reasons. First one is the sense of agency. A lot of the bigger moments in this story, Brittany feels like a passerby. Now, if the story would just focused on how Brittany met Belle and Brooke, this would be forgiven as well. The whole point is that the whole point of Belle in the dynamic is the fact, not Belle, Brittany in the dynamic, I'm turning into my mom, is the fact that Brittany is just literally wanting to be there. She has her friends, she's very happy, but she's kind of in the background and just adding to the dynamic between Belle, Brooklyn, and Brittany. And that's fine. And establishing that dynamic as a main character would have been easy to do. The problem is the other half of the story is dedicated to Brittany trying to learn about her autism and trying to live with it. This is perfectly exemplified by her parents, who are basically caricatures of helicopter parents. What do I mean by caricatures? Well, there is a specific part in the story. For the best example will be this part in chapter 2, where Brittany is actually describing her parents' overprotectiveness at a time where she's on a bus trying to get home that gets stopped by a train. Basically, the framing of this is she's going home from school. The bus stops in front of a train, probably a cargo train. That's because cargo trains tend to be very long. They are They are a minute past the time where she would expect it home. The parents freak out, and then promptly decided to call her, panicking, "Where are you?" It's like, "I'm on the bus. I'm in front of a train." It's like, "Okay, we'll pick you up." And then as soon as he picks up, they actually appear right next to the bus in their car, ready to pick her up. There's overprotectiveness, and then there's this. Now, what does it have to do with Brittany's lack of sense of agency? Later in the story, near the end, Brittany actually confronts her parents because she's tired of their overprotectiveness. So what does she do? She takes a bike, takes it outside, and wants to ride it. However, she also hates she hates the training wheels. The parents see this, freak out, go outside, start trying to cover her in basically protective gear, and she tries to explain that she wants to do it. Now, in this case, if they were over caricatures of parents, it would have been fine if the whole point is that show that, well, even if she gets hurt, she's willing to stand on her own. What happens in the story is, well, basically they overcrowd her. Brittany tries to tell them off in her own 8-year-old way. Then Brittany's parents then explain to her that she has Asperger's and after explaining, bring her back outside, take off the training wheels, give her less protection, and let her try to ride off. Now, if she had a sense of agency, it would have made more sense in this case for her to fall off the bike as she was riding. Because again, even if you get on the bike without training wheels, it is very common for you to fall off. It would have made this part so much better if either she fell off, the parents actually try to interfere, even on an instinctual level, and instead of trying to yell at her, she just simply looks at them, tells them to trust me, picks the bike back up, gets back on it, and rides again. Showing that even if she, might have got injured, that doesn't matter because she gets to have fun anyway. It's the same thing at the end of the story with the situation with Wendy. Now, there is a running theme with this story involving the school with this bully named Wendy, no relation to Wendy Koopa. Wendy has a grudge against Belle, and the thing is vice versa. They basically hate each other. So most of the time, Wendy tends to bully either Bendy or, at one point in the story, bully Brittany. Now, it would make a lot of sense in the context of the story if Wendy would actually bully Brittany at the end before getting expelled as a sort of way to rile up Belle. Think about it. It would make more sense in the context of the story if Wendy knew that she was probably going to that she was on her last legs, but also knows that Belle's on her last legs because Belle was constantly reminded that she is one fight away from being expelled herself. Wouldn't it make more sense to have Wendy find Brittany, decide to bully Brittany, specifically to rile up Belle in order to try and swing and get her expelled? In essence, even at worst, it's a taking you with me sort of thing. Belle, she starts bullying Brittany. Brittany turns around to find Belle because Brittany would be the type of person who would completely worry about Belle possibly getting into a fight, just like Brooklyn. She turns around, she sees Brooklyn trying to hold back Belle, and instead of, crying or anything, we get that sense of urgency and agency where she actually stands up for herself. Now, physically attacking Wendy wouldn't work because Brittany's character, that would actually be out of character for Brittany, but I don't see no reason to say Brittany gets creative with like an insult or two, uses her power-up knowledge to kind of just say, yeah, I don't know. Oh, like, your brain is smaller than a mini mushroom or something. Even if it's like a weak insult, it would actually, it'd be something. Because the whole point would be the stall until the president shows up. She drag her to the principal's office, gets expelled, and then And then Belle, Brittany, and Brooklyn's parents basically tell the principal off for you're not really doing your job. And then we have that. It would give a sense of agency to Brittany in that single moment, allowing her to showcase how she grew from the beginning of the story to the end. And instead, she kind of comes off as a minor role in both parts, because what actually happened in the story is Wendy's bullying Benny, trying to take a laptop, and then gets expelled for that. It's good because it deals with the Wendy issue, and of course it still ties into Belle because Benny is actually Belle's brother, but it doesn't really fit the story of trying to grow and be happy and find the friendship. The other thing is character dynamics. In order for a lot of characters to function, not every character needs this because there are some characters that just work better by themselves. Character dynamics establish how a character works in an overall world. They having introduced to other characters, how them interact, and how the characters bounce off each other. Going back to World Above, Belle and Pearl are a perfect example, as they often tongue-tied because my throat is dry. They bounce off each other really well because of their opposite personalities. Pearl is a very curious, somewhat adventurous girl, and Belle is a super adventurous tomboy bee who just really loves gaming and thinks her fist can solve all of life's problems. Probably until she tries to punch a brick wall and she kind of realizes punching a wall doesn't help. Ah! With Brittany, this is a type of character that needs not only various character dynamics, but also establishing using the characters as a way to help Brittany's character growth. Thing is, that doesn't really do. Again, that helps with the friends, but not really on the autism side. Due to the lack of agency, she basically has her parents who kind of mediocre, besides them being a caricature. And then there's Brittany's grandmother, which is just your typical kind of lady who just gives advice. Nothing really special. Again, everything from the friendship. If it was just focusing exclusively on how Brittany met Brooklyn and Belle, this would be fine. But when you add in the element of her trying to learn to live with having autism and having to overcome the fact that she has a different mind, her mind works differently, and that side doesn't really get enough tension because it's trying to focus on the dynamic between the three. It kind of leaves Brittany's character very lacking in a sense. Now, is the character bad? If you take it from just the friendship side, then the character is actually good because it perfectly tries to slot in her character being the whole, the more backgroundy character that's really just happy to be there hanging out with Brooklyn and Belle. That's perfect. That's fine. But the autism side of Brittany's character is very lacking because there's just not really enough to latch onto Brittany's character with. She's a very lacking character on that front. And that kind of leaves the issue of if Brittany is good as a character or not. Personally, I think she's not really, because I think in this case the autism thing is just that important, and the friendship thing is like something we kind of know is going to happen. But if you want to make the argument that Brittany is actually a good character, I can see it just enough. Again, it's just how you view the story, like whether you're focusing on Brittany finding Belle in Brooklyn or her own adventures with autism. In terms of The other characters, I do think Belle and Brooklyn, they do work fine. There's even like a little joke at the end of the story where where you can see right here, they kind of just do a SpongeBob reference. The next day, see Belle, that's how you do it. That sounded even worse. And honestly, that was pretty funny. There's even earlier in the story where you see, I think it's right here. Yeah, right here. 5 minutes later. Belle, that is the worst French accent I've ever heard. I'll see you do better. And guess what? She does. Whether or not which one did better is subjective because it's written word. But these two are very well done. The grandmother and the parents, the author tries with them. The problem is they don't really show up enough in the story to kind of leave an impact on the reader. They're fine. They have a solid foundation for what they're trying to do. Belle's parents trying to be the overprotective parents with a legitimate reason why they're protecting Brittany, because because of course she's been bullied all her life because her mind's different, and trying to simply, be there for her so that way she doesn't keep getting bullied, so that she has someone to latch onto. And of course you have the grandmother who's basically just offering advice and all that. Maybe because I think early in the story the grandmother revealed to actually were working at the school that she was going to. It's kind of weird that we didn't see the grandma actually work in the school to kind of offer advice or even meet Belle and Brooklyn. That's fine. Grammar error. Grammars. I didn't see anything wrong with the grammar errors. I didn't see anything wrong with the pacing. I think the story is paced pretty well. The sentence structure, I think, is well done. The way the story is framed with Brittany just telling a story to Pearl and a Storm is really neat. I even like the details of whenever any of the characters, whether it be Pearl, Belle, Brooklyn, or Benny, because he's there too, they're written in bold text. I would prefer that if you do this bold text, you probably go back and probably have a little indentation to tell you who specifically is speaking in the bold. But that'd be it. Do I have a favorite part? Probably the mall chapter. So it's right here. There is a part, and this is honestly what I meant by it's when it's bold, kind of do this to kind of let you know who's speaking. The story kind of flip flops between Belle, Benny, and Brittany. So BR would be Brittany, BL would be Belle, and BN would be Benny. And kind of goes constantly rewinding. My favorite part of this chapter is specifically just the Belle and Brooklyn parts, because I still think Belle is just a really hilarious character. Even the stories here is her constantly arguing with Brooklyn over what they should get for gifts. No, BR is Brooklyn. Because I just realized there's Brittany. Yeah, but BR is Brittany, BL is Belle, and BN is Benny. And this whole thing is from their point of views. The whole point of them going is they want to get gifts for Brittany, and they're kind of and Benny's just kind of runs using cover no. Okay, we'll leave you alone, Belle. It's oh, you owe me so big, Belle. You owe me. And eventually Benny gets caught at the end. It's young lady, Benny. They opened the door, man. I didn't know what to do. And I do think it's just a very entertaining chapter, because again, this whole chapter is just completely carried by Belle and her indomitable, hilarious energy. It's yes, I am Belle. I am awesome. You're also very annoying. Get up! Don't ruin my time. And I think it's just very entertaining. Is there anything I would fix with the story? Like I said in the previous video, there's a lot of ways you can go about it. You can have You can better establish Brittany's dynamics with her parents and her grandmother. Maybe have them, a simple way of doing that would be to have them show up more. You can still go the imaginary friend route. I do think at the very least it would make more sense just to have Brittany fall off the bike when she goes to ride the bike. Just to show that sense of agency that we need to give her to kind of help her with the autism side of her story. Like she wouldn't get injured because she's wearing the protective pads. Like, oh, she just falls off. She would, if not for the pad, she would scrape her elbow. She's like, okay, and she's like, and just have her fall off the bike, get back up. The parents like instinctively try to cover because like at the end of the day they're overprotective parents. Even if they doesn't mean they're gonna do it on habit and just have her get on the bike and and then just have her wander off, and the parents could think, oh, maybe we were overreacting. Kind of hammer home the fact that she's growing up. I don't know what you do with the Wendy situation. I still think it would make more sense for like Brittany just to get an insult in, because like again, you can kind of get a lot of people with autism tend to get like very creative with insults. So you kind of just go that, especially with like involving their hyperfixations. Like crud. What you're? Oh yeah, you're so fuming in the face right now. Even you look like a red star. oh. Like it's just like again, it doesn't have to be a good insult. Just an insult. Just an insult would work. A single one. There is something that really needs to be improved with her befriending Brittany and Belle. Not Belle. Not. Goddamn mom. Establishing Brittany's dynamic with Belle and Brooklyn. I think that's fine. It's really just the autism side of the story that needs work. So yeah, that is pretty much my re-review of The Bee Who Couldn't Fit. I'm still gonna leave. Like I said, I'm still gonna leave the original video up for the Angel Beat story. So I hope I actually did the author proud on this. I think I did as good as a job that I can. Before I end the video, I do want to apologize one more time to the author. There's no excuse for the shitty quality I had for the first review. I hope this video sincerely makes up for that. I will see you next time when I do From Beyond, because I still gotta review that story. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.